Welcome to the wonderful world of duo mists. Let me be your guide today. Solo PvP is awesome because every decision you make really matters. Group PvP is awesome because it's fun to play socially. Playing as a duo, however, gives you a bit of both worlds. There are three types of duo combinations that you and your friend or girlfriend can choose between when going into duo mists. I'll go over each of those to first help you decide what to play and B, get a better understanding of how PvP dynamics work in duo mists. After that, I will also go over 5 fundamental battle tactics for duo PvP. Okay, let's get started. The first category of duo combinations is a very classic setup. One healer and one DPS. For any regular PvP fight, this is generally considered the strongest duo setup in Albion Online. This is because healing in Albion is very strong. If you're considering playing this type of duo, there are however a couple things you should know. One big benefit of this is that you will be able to fight any other duo who is similar IP to you. Another very nice thing is that often you will be able to punch way above your grade. And if you play it well, a healer plus DPS can win fights against duos who don't have a healer even when you are maybe 2 tiers lower, occasionally maybe even more. So it can make you some very nice silver profits if you get really good at it. However, there are some other things to consider. First of all, since most players know how strong healing is in Albion, many will completely avoid fighting you. So you kind of risk ending up in a situation where most of your time in duo mists you will spend running after people trying to desperately get them into combat with you. Secondly, this setup generally places a bit of a disproportionate burden on you and your duo partner. In this duo combo, being the healer is going to be much more difficult on average. Being good at healing in duos requires very good game knowledge and good mechanics. It's very simple to make a mistake, use your defensives incorrectly or use your spell on the wrong target. Now I'm not really trying to downplay the DPS. Obviously the DPS matters a lot. Every decision in duos has an impact. In fact, once you start fighting other duos with a healer, the difference maker will very often be the DPS. How well the DPS is able to combo their spells, to hit both enemies at once, etc. But in general, you should prepare that the person playing healer is in for a rough one. If your DPS messes up, you will sometimes lose a kill, or the fight will take longer, you need to regroup a bit. If your healer messes up, you will die, a lot. However, if you do decide to go down this route, my big suggestion to you is to trust your healer and make sure that your DPS build is optimized for actually doing damage. This means things like 100% always using cloth armor. Do not use mercenary jacket or any sort of leather armor with your healer. You need to do damage and trust that they will keep you alive. This also means not using healing potions. Using either potions to help you do damage, like poisons or sometimes maybe tornadoes or hellfires. Using resistance potions if you needed defensives. Trust your healer. By far, currently the strongest healing weapon for duo mists is the one-handed holy. But of course, you can try out any holy or nature staffs and see how it works or test out why it doesn't work. Just remember that if you watch older duo mist content, you will see a lot of Graveguard Helmet Iron Root, but that was before this weapon was slightly reworked. It's really not that good anymore. Now, for the DPS for this duo, choose something that does a lot of damage and doesn't mind being in front, at least somewhat. Swords are absolutely great for this, and it's by far the most popular choice in duo mists. Dual swords, carving sword, claymore. Some axes can be decent, like battle axe, carrion collar, death givers are viable, many curse staffs are kinda nice. You can test out whatever you feel like playing, but remember that you are the only person doing damage, so you need a high damage build and you need to be ready to stand in front so that you take more of your attention, more of the enemy's attention, and your healer can heal you rather than hiding behind your healer on a bow or something. Oh, and by the way, if you're playing healer in this setup, all of your spells need to be spells that can heal both you as well as your teammate, depending on what the situation requires. If you swap to something like Holy Beam, the fight is just over. Any experienced opponent will instantly see that you cannot heal yourself with your W and drop all their damage on you and probably kill you. Let's move on with this to the second type of classic duo setup, which is the one-shot. This is a combination of builds which have just one game plan and one goal: to dump all of their spells right away and focus down and kill one enemy player with one quick rotation. There's a couple reasons why this is such a popular and strong choice for duomists. First of all, it is a direct answer to healers. It's impossible to really beat a healer duo in a long fight, but if you dump a gigaton of burst damage right away before they can start healing up, you can win. The second big benefit of this setup is the big potential for killing high value targets. Against duos who have much higher IP, you might not really stand a chance in a fair, long fight, but you might still be able to one-shot one of them and get away with some nice loot if you use all your spells correctly. And final reason why this is a very popular duo setup is that it's probably the simplest one to play. Once again, I'm not saying that there isn't room for actual thinking and outplay and skill ceilings here, of course there is. Every decision in duo matters. But many fights with a one-shot duo comp are just rinse and repeat of the exact same combo with really little consideration of the specifics of the fight. And so one of the big drawbacks of this is that it will remain fairly simple. So if you're looking for a more varied and interesting or challenging approach, this is probably not the best choice because it can get boring. As you get more advanced, you will still need to, account for your enemy's defensives. Sometimes, even after your first combo fails, you can successfully kite your enemy, buy time for your second rotation and then win. So there will still be interesting things to do, but less than with other duo setups. As for specific builds, there are a lot of one-shot combo guides out there that you can look at and almost directly just copy the builds and the playstyle. The three most popular one-shots for duomists are the following. First of all, Incubus Staff and Incubus Mace and Blazing Staff. Secondly, Grail Seeker and One-Handed Dagger. And thirdly, Soul Sight and Spirit Hunter. So if you're interested in this type of playstyle, choose one of these three options to get started and go look how others are playing this combo. And this brings us to the third category of PvP setups for duomists, which is double DPS. Now, you could say that this is essentially any duo that doesn't have a healer and is not a clear one-shot comp. So everything else falls under this broad category of random DPS plus another random DPS. Now, there are benefits and drawbacks as always. The biggest benefit is that it's very fun. I'm not saying that other comps aren't, to each of us their own, but going in with double DPS is fun because you will have a lot of different situations that you will have to approach and solve very differently. Fights will be all kinds of interesting, unpredictable, will bring all kinds of interesting, unpredictable things. And in my opinion, that's by far the biggest selling point of just taking two DPS builds and going to play duo. It's fun. You're not just doing the same over and over again, you find all kinds of interesting fights. It's also very good for learning. Just like solo PvP forces you to actually face your mistakes and learn how to play, duomists, when you play it with double DPS, has a bit of a similar effect. The lessons you will learn will help you become a better all-around PvP player. But it can also feel overly difficult at times to play this. For example, against a good healer, if you are the same tier, you have zero chance. Actually, zero. Obviously, a lot of healers will have bad builds and make mistakes, and you can still take those fights and try to bait your enemy into those mistakes, but it can feel pretty frustrating if you go into a missed objective and you see another fully spec'd meta healer plus sword combo, and you know that your only chance is to just leave and change mists and try again. Against one-shot comps, your ability to fight depends very much on your build. For example, when I played duos with one of my friends, our win rate against one-shots went from I think about 10% all the way to 80%, when the only thing we changed is that I started using mercenary shoes. Okay, so hopefully this helps you understand better what you want to play, what kind of playstyle you like, and what options are out there and what to expect in duomists. if you haven't played that much of it yet. Now let's move on to 5 fundamental battle tactics that I suggest, or strategic considerations, let's say, that I strongly suggest you acknowledge and think about if you want to be successful in Duo Mists. Number 1. What exactly will happen if the enemy duo you're fighting fully focuses you? You need to have a plan. What are you going to do if 2 enemy players start dumping every spell and their kitchen sink into your face, completely ignoring your partner? What are the defensives that you will use? When will you use which defensive? Are you going to boots to create space? Are you going to drink a res pot or a gig pot? Will you go invis and wait for your friend to be focused instead? Or maybe you actually want your enemy to focus you, so you will stand proudly in front, happily soaking up damage, knowing that by the time you start dying, hopefully your duo partner will have almost killed both of your enemies. You need a plan, and before you go into Duo Mists, I suggest that you figure out the answer to this question. What are you going to do when the enemy duo fully focuses you? Strategic consideration number 2. Mobility in duos is much less valuable than in solo PvP. Now, Mists remain a sort of instanced open world setting, so mobility will always remain a relevant part of the equation. But if you've played as a solo in the open world, in Roads of Avalon, or in solo Mists, then you have probably come to value mobility more than is correct for Duo Mist specifically. So it's time to dial it down a little bit if you come from a solo background. If you choose too much mobility at the expense of damage or at the expense of crowd control, you will start losing fights by not having enough damage and tools to be the first team to get a kill. You know that joke that to escape a bear attack, you don't need to run faster than the bear, you just need to run faster than your friend. Yeah, it's pretty much like that. When you choose spells like Frost Shot, Triple Kick, Dash, Battle Rush, you're essentially saying, okay, we might not be able to kill the enemy fast, but at least if they come for me, I can get out so that they kill my friend instead. These spells that I listed might still be situationally correct, but do not go overboard on mobility. Hypermobility in Duo Mists is weak compared to solo content. Kiting in general is difficult and weaker and often leads to failure, because the enemy just needs to catch one of you and the fight is over. Now, one of you might survive every encounter, but if you're never really winning equal fights and always losing one of the two, it's not a very good long-term strategy. The only way that a very kite-heavy duo can work is if you are both good advanced PvP players already and you are completely on the same page with each other on how you will approach the fight and when you are going to kite together. Tactical consideration number 3. Burst damage is better than slow sustained damage. It should be very obvious why this is the case against a healer. In fact, the whole foundation of why one-shot strategies exist is this, and we talked about it earlier. But even in all other fights, in Duo Mists, doing damage as a burst on average will perform better because your enemies will find it harder to react to it and adapt to the situation. The same thing that I mentioned earlier, you need to have a plan, what you're gonna do if you get focused. Well, it's much more difficult when you have 3 seconds to react as opposed to when the damage is happening slowly. Of course, you still need to be mindful of defensives and not drop all of your damage into a cleric rope. But the fact that burst damage in duos is generally better than slow sustained damage is also the reason why weapons that like to slowly whittle down their opponents that can be effective in other types of content can struggle more in Duo Mists. For example, the one-handed spear, the frost staff, many curse staffs, they aren't bad, but they perform worse than other weapons which are able to do big damage in a short amount of time. Tactical consideration number 4. You need to coordinate your attacks with your partner. This is obvious, hopefully. It's duo content, so better teamwork will usually win, or win more. It's a good idea to coordinate 2 things specifically with your partner during a fight. First of all, who is the priority target that you are trying to kill first? And secondly, communicate your cooldowns and sync your spells a little bit. For example, I played a lot of Tomb Hammer plus Bow of Badon with a friend. And in that setup, it is very obvious that my friend on his Bow of Badon is not going to just randomly use his E for damage, but instead he's going to wait for my stun. And as the fight, because that's the combo, that's the big burst that we're trying to do. And as the fight progresses, we would always keep each other informed of our big cooldowns, so that we never end up in a situation where he just missed his E because he used it 3 seconds before my stun was ready. Or that I just randomly waste my stun just before his E gets ready. So even if you are playing some random DPS combo, not specifically designed, to put your one E and other E together, like let's say Battle Axe and Dual Swords, instead of just clicking all your abilities as 2 solo players fighting together, tell your partner that your E is almost ready so that they can wait 2 seconds and you can do that one big burst of damage that we talked about. You can do that together and make it harder for your enemy to react. And the final, 5th fundamental strategic consideration for duo mists is that AoE, area of effect, is important. There are 2 sides to this coin. First of all, it's a good idea to always try to hit both enemies with any of your AoE spells. Now, trying to burst down one target is still the best strategy, like I've been talking throughout this video, but as much as you can, be mindful of your weapons and your build's ability to hit both enemies. As an example, let's say you're using Carving Sword. Before you use your E, go walk next to one of your enemy targets and then drive through both of them. So you do the damage and cut their defensives for both of them. If you're playing against 2 melee weapons, you can often just let them get on top of you so that they stand next to each other and then hit your powerful AoE spells. And of course, the second side of this coin is to be mindful of your own positioning and try to avoid being too close to your partner at all times. This is a big reason why running 2 melee DPS is usually more difficult than 1 melee and 1 range, because you're gonna get hit with a lot of damage, which it's essentially like your enemy has double damage, right? If your enemy hits their impalers, their bow, Qs, ray of lights, whatever things they have for damage, if they hit all of those on 2 people, they are double as effective. So you need to be careful to avoid your enemy's AoE spells while still trying to burst down one of your targets together. And by the way, one very fun weapon which performs really well in duo mists based on all these strategies we've discussed is the Heron Spear. And if you want to see me play Heron Spear in solo PvP to see how that goes, then check out this video here next. See ya!